Okay, guys, I think we're going to get going. Thanks for joining us. Um, my name is David Keating and I'm in Dublin, and I want to thank the FilmEU people for getting us all here today, and also, of course, the Emmy nominated and multi-award winning documentary maker and feature film director, Emer Reynolds. Thanks, Emer, for being with us here. I have lots of questions I want to ask Emer about her process, her career, and I'm going to try and shut off those bleeps without disconnecting myself. Well, maybe we're just going to have to live with the bleeps. No, but I'm hoping that you guys are going to be asking lots of questions too. Emer's had a really fascinating career thus far, and I think it's fair to say she's at a particularly exciting time in it. Having had maybe somebody needs to mute their mic there. I was just going to say briefly that Emer is extremely well known in the Irish film industry, and now increasingly internationally, due to her the films that over the years that she edited, going and being featured in festivals and selling worldwide. But I'm guessing, Emer, about sort of 10 or 12 years ago, you started to transition into being move across into being a director, and we're going to be talking about that quite a bit. But before we sort of get there, could you tell us a bit about your background? I've seen a reference to you visiting your uncle's farm in Tipperary in the Irish countryside and staring up at the night sky, which helped to spark your love of astronomy and space. And you studied physics and maths, I gather, in Trinity College in Dublin University. So could you take us through how that led you to becoming a film editor, and how did your background in Ireland lead you to get involved in film?
Okay, hello everybody, good morning or good afternoon, thanks for joining us. Yeah, as you say, I grew up, I straddled two worlds as a child. My mother died when we were very small, so my father, this was a time often when, in Ireland at least, children who were left without a mother were given to orphanages. So it was amazing that he kept us and took care of us, but he couldn't do that full time while he was working. So we spent, for about 12 years, I spent half my year in Dublin going to school, living with him, and the other half living on a beautiful dairy farm down in Tipperary, where, as you say, I very, very fond memories of lying on the grass at night, staring up at, a proper dark sky that I wouldn't have had in Dublin, and fell in love with, wanted to be an astronaut, fell in love with space, fell in love with maths and physics. And yeah, that kicked off that side of my life. I studied theoretical physics and pure maths in Trinity. And we had quite a, I think my dad was pretty eclectic, very interested in science, very interested in maths, very interested in puzzles, also incredibly interested in art and literature and drama. And, so I had a very nice beginnings in a nice broad look at all the disciplines. And I was definitely, I felt a bit strange. I was good at writing. I was good at English essays and literature. I loved going to the theatre. And I was also, I think physics and maths were my standout subjects, a natural inclination towards that. So I never understood, certainly in Ireland in school, I don't know if it's the same for you, David, they seem to think people were either arty and into English and music, or they were interested in science and chemistry and all that, so they didn't seem to see that. But I was always a kind of a combination of the two. And I hadn't much of a clue as to how I might combine those parts of my brain. But I had the good fortune of attending a film club in school when I was maybe 16. They ran a film club every Friday night. And I saw the film 12 Angry Men. And I think, you know, up until that point, I wanted to be an astronaut, then I wanted to be a pilot, then I wanted to be a physics teacher. You know, I was kind of definitely looking that way. And that one film just twisted me around. I thought it lit me up in terms of what film could do. This incredible conversation, this aesthetically beautiful event, you know, this really, really interesting narrative of all these characters, and the performances are incredible. But the subtext or the subject, you know, this big argument about race, this big argument about prejudice, you know, and I came home lit up, you know, had a huge discussion for hours with my dad about what it all meant, and could film change minds, could film change the world. And then I decided to go into film, although I was just about to start studying physics. So I joined the Film Society in Trinity, and yeah, we were making short films, and the first short film I worked on was written and starred Anne Enright, who's the Booker winning author, Irish author, incredible woman. And yeah, had the good fortune, really my very good fortune, to be asked into the editing room. It was being cut by a man who was an editor at RTE, our national TV station here. He was just doing it at weekends, and yeah, one more falling in love. I fell in love with editing. I had no idea that editing existed in the universe. I saw this alchemy, this incredible process of taking an idea and putting it beside another idea, and that the two together were greater than the two parts, and that they made a connection. And then you tore it up and you put a different shot in or a different idea, and it changed everything utterly. And it was this incredibly fluid, creative, playful, challenging role where you could really play with ideas and play with how to build a film. So that's how I got into film. He offered me a job as a trainee after I finished in Trinity, and yeah, I worked my way up, you know, proper trainee all the way up to editing over a number of years that way.
And Emer, that would have been cutting on film on 16 or on 35 mil film, and with all the sound work being done on SEPMAG, which is, you know, for those of us who experienced that, that was a beautiful thing. That was an amazing. But it was perhaps a slightly more tactile experience and a physical experience for editors in the cutting room, much as all you know, the digital world is fabulous. You mentioned earlier that your interest in writing and your facility with writing. Can I just ask you at this point about the relationship as you see it between writing and editing? It seems to me there's a big overlap there.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, we'd often discuss editing being like the final draft. You know, that you're definitely you've the draft that was shot and the draft that is edited, or you know, it changes utterly. And our writers talk about having the same experience. You know, being in a little dark room alone with their thoughts. You know, and trying to. All the tools that the writer is using every minute of every day, the editor is also using, and they're separated in time, but it's the same ideas to do with structure, to do with tone, to do with pace, to do with dissemination of information, where and how to turn your audience around to seeing what you want them to see, maybe hiding something else, you know, like they're all the same tools. And I think they're very similar art forms, even though by the time the editor, and it's interesting you talk about film being tactile, I still do that. You know, I show you two shots beside each other, even though they're not, you know, in a digital realm, you don't perceive them like that, but I still do. But by the time the editors come in, the writing has changed into imagery and sound and music. You know, there's a lot of other levels that the writer is just evoking. But yeah, very, very similar processes, and very, you know, without criticizing the process, I think the writing and the editing also suffer from a lot more voices, and opinion and notes that perhaps the rest of the process doesn't. You know, there's a freedom when you're shooting to just figure it out, whereas the writer and you know, at the other end, as I say, separated in time and space, they become a lot of eyes on what's being done. You know, so we both writers and editors and directors in editing have to navigate those relationships, I think, and that can be tricky.
Mm. So you went from college, from university into working as an assistant editor, training up in that discipline. Then you took that step that pretty much every editor does, from assisting to being the editor, with all the considerable responsibilities that has. What was that like?
I look back now and I'm amazed that I did it without, you know, going to hospital and checking in for the stress of it. You know, I was young. I thought I could do it. You know, it was a time when assistant editors were in the room with the editor and were in the room with the director and the producer. So you were you were a spy in the room. You weren't fully at the wheel, you weren't responsible, but you were, you know, in the back of the room filing trims or doing, you know, all the jobs the assistant editor, but privy to what is the nature of editing really, which is collaboration, which is, you know, conversation, learning each other's skill set, trying to turn each other to different points of view. It's as much about that. It's probably more about that as the editor than it is about your skill in deconstructing the scene and putting the film together. You know, a huge amount of it is the relationships and the conversation and the dialogue. So as an assistant editor, I would be at the back of the room eavesdropping on all of this and learning, you know. And I always, as an editor, when I was, obviously I started in film, but I went very quickly. I think I only cut 2 films on film and then was straight onto Avid. But I always tried to have my assistant editors close, you know, so that they too would be able to absorb just by osmosis all that learning, because it's so much a part of the story. But so when I look back, I think when I was offered a film to cut, I just thought it was natural to do it. But I look back now and I think, oh my God, what was I, you know, was it stupidity or arrogance, or what was it that I thought, you know, that I just went for it, as opposed to now I'd be more aware of the responsibility and what was really involved. But I just jumped in. I thought it was great. I thought it was great. The folly of youth.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear that you continue that process with assistants, you know, with both as an editor and of course as a director. I sometimes feel that the way things have worked, and of course the pandemic has exacerbated this, that the work can be a little less collaborative and a little more siloed. And actually, I know in my own experiences, I learned so much from the editors that I got to work with, or from the assistant directors that I got to work with when I was doing that there is a tradition in our industry of kind of going, oh, you're interested, come on in, come and listen to this, sit in on this meeting. And it's lovely to hear you talk about that. So anybody listening in on this and thinking about how you might upskill apart from your studies, yeah, try and be in the room, I think is a great reminder from Emer. So you know, you have a long track record behind you as an editor, and maybe I'd love to know if you're you know, hoping that you'll continue as a director to make documentaries as well as dramas. But in terms of that, moving on then to become a director, which I was trying to figure it out, because I think I think Here Was Cuba came out about 2013, so I'm guessing you were probably well directing, you know, 10 years ago, maybe longer than that. What were the skills that you'd already acquired that you were able to directly apply to working as a director? And were there other areas where you kind of wanted to train a bit more or upskill or concentrate more on?
Yeah, a very good question. It's about 10 years. I think it was 2013. Yeah, that we made HERE Was CUBA. I thought I shot it in 2013. So anyway, around about 9 or 10 years ago. And I was very fortunate because that one I co-directed with John Murray, who had been a director and a producer that I had worked with on a number of films very closely, myself as editor and him as director producer. So we had a very good short and a very good relationship already. And he asked me to come and co-direct HERE Was CUBA with him, which, you know, it kind of stunned me because I hadn't thought about it, but I was really interested. I was interested to try it and see. And it was a very, very good way to start because we kind of divided up the role in a nice way. So I was able to do the stuff that I was really comfortable with, that I felt that, you know, that I could control and I could lead and I could dream up. And then he took the other parts that I wasn't as comfortable with. So I basically ran the kind of the visual set, the visual imagery, the approach, the tone of it. I, you know, ran the visual side of it and the storytelling and the cut and all that. And John did an awful lot of work with the contributors, conducted all the interviews. I'm actually a pretty shy person, so I was terrified with the idea of talking to these incredibly accomplished history experts, you know, and not being able to get through the interview. So I had an incredible training on set of watching John, who's a brilliant interviewer, interview. I think we interviewed 30 something Cuban, Russian, and American and English experts. So really learned on the job, you know, how to run interviews, and he ran all the kind of the more practical side of it. And then I was free to you know, channel the pure creative side of it. How would I want to tell this story? And John was incredibly supportive. We just played with all the ideas, how we might put together existing archive, how we might freshen that up, how to talk in a new way, and what were the other parts of the story. So the visual side of it and the deeper stuff that I was interested in, you know, the nature of war, the nature of the threat of worldwide destruction, you know, so tapping into all these ideas. So I learned in a really good way on the first film. And if you're asking what did I feel I needed, I definitely felt I needed to see interviewing in action, and I got that, and it became a favorite skill of mine on my next two documentaries. You know, I put an awful lot of work and effort into how I would become a great interviewer and work really, really hard on both the Farthest and on Songs While I'm Away to master that art form. I also, I think in all of them, and particularly on HERE Was CUBA, I felt it. I came to the visual shoot with loads of ideas, with loads of planning, you know, loads of thinking. And I was trying to stop myself thinking like the editor. You know, I was trying to be as free as a director would be, which is, you know, just follow your instincts, follow your nose, shoot what you like, take a punt without having to understand how it might work in the final film, you know, in a documentary I'm talking about. So I tried to hone that skill further over the other films, you know, that I cut my first documentary myself. And then on my second two, I was fortunate enough to have Tony Cranston, who's an amazing BAFTA and ACE winning editor based here in Ireland, to cut my other two films for me. And then I felt free to not care about the edit, you know, trusting that the edit will fix itself, will find its flow, you know, will argue for its own existence, and that I was free to just be as playful and as anarchic and as cryptic as I wanted in the visual language, and trust that the story would, because it's all coming through me anyway, it would all find its way out, you know, and it did.
You know, I think for the directors in the room here together, but also for other people as well, because I know we have editors and producers and writers here today, but I think you've just given a really important pointer for directors to, from whatever discipline we might come, to find that balance between the command and control aspect of planning, which is great. We love to plan, it's fantastic, to the sense and respond aspect of being present on the set, looking at what's in front of us, going and lying down with a viewfinder or a camera and looking up, or climbing up and looking down, and actually exploring what we're seeing, what we're hearing there on the day. That we allow ourselves to do that rather than simply execute a plan or plan for the cut.
Because you actually can't know. I mean, you simply can't know while you're out there what you might need and what strange little red herring or, blind alley might be completely compelling to you, so your job when you're out there, after you've done all your research and all your planning, and before you have to try to make it like, pouring cement or something, you've got this window where you must be free and you must be open and receptive to all the surprises.
Yeah, and you used the word playful as well, which I think is great. Now, because I really want to ask you about the farthest, as you know, but just before we go there, and just staying on Here Was Cuba, which was, of course, an extremely successful, an extremely ambitious film, and a very successful film. I hope you don't mind me doing this, but I actually found a quote from an interview that you did, and I was just wondering if you'd talk to us a bit more. And I know that sometimes these things get garbled in during an interview or in the process of editing interviews. But you were speaking with a writer named Georgia Carossi, and I think it might have been a part of the Doc Fest in Sheffield. And I think you said something like, rather than use, and you were speaking about Here Was Cuba, rather than using material as general background imagery, I wanted to treat it as drama footage and cut it in particular as though we were watching the drama unfolding in real time. This approach in the film, I hope, is one of the reasons the film feels so frightening. I thought this was so interesting because you've also said, I think at times, that you're not crazy about narration, conventional voiceover. And this sort of hits into the use of either library footage or material that you would shoot yourself, and how you use that material not as background pictures, but as like we do in drama.
Okay, it's either a weakness or a strength of mine, but I hate narration, mostly because it makes me snooze off when I'm watching something. When somebody's going to tell me all the pieces of the story, all in a logical and plausible way, I kind of tune out a little. I kind of go, I don't really need to stay connected here, because it's all going to walk in step in proper order. And so when you make a documentary not using narration, drawing from pure contribution, it's kind of wild, because they go left when you thought they were going to go right. And as they're about to tell you a piece of the story, they kind of, like always, everybody, even as we're doing today, they add on another little bit. They kind of give you another little twirl somewhere else. And it flashes you all over the place. So I find it really, really visceral. I find it really thrilling to watch a film. All the films, the documentary films I like, are made like that. You don't know where the story is going to go, because it's not going to just be a straight line. And the archive in particular is the same. It can be used as kind of filler and background, just shots to get you from A to B. It's just stuff. It's kind of filling in a scene. And I wanted to cut it if we were to do it right, and that it should feel like it. You almost watched the film not knowing whether we had gotten away with it, whether nuclear war had fallen on us, that you'd be watching it thinking, having all the same tension of this particular night when they didn't know if they were going to wake up to Armageddon, so it just seemed like a very logical and ordinary thing to do, to me, that you would cut the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis like a thriller, and in that way, in the very essence of the style, communicate the big picture, which is even now that we're not safe. That these nuclear weapons are in the hands of malign actors, and even now, as is borne out by our the current state of our world, whether certain forces would be prepared to unleash one, so I also didn't see it as dusty old history film. I saw it as it really could happen any minute now, so, and I wanted to. And I think cutting it for drama, cutting it as a drama, and using all the imagery in a dramatic way was the only way to do that.
Great, yeah. I mean, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, often described as the closest that we ever got to ending the world. And then you went on in your next film. I guess maybe 2 or 3 years later, or you started, I imagine the lead time on the Farthest.
Yeah, huge.
Quite long.
Yeah.
And again, huge subjects. You went on to what has been described as one of humankind's greatest achievements, the Voyager 1 and 2 missions. How did that come together for you? How did you embark on that?
Same innocence again. After we made Here Was Cuba, we had a very good relationship with the financiers, and there was a sense of what would you do next. And John and I had talked about, space being space in general being where we wanted to go next. So out of those conversations, the Voyager spacecraft started emerging as a very suitable subject, because not only was it this incredible scientific adventure, this incredible, humankind's greatest journey of exploration. This spacecraft studied all the 4 outer planets who had never been seen before the solar system, and has left the solar system, is now out in interstellar space. So it's an incredible scientific achievement. It's already scientifically really, really interesting. And then it has this golden record, this art project basically included in the spacecraft, which was made by Carl Sagan and Frank Drake, these incredible people who are very interested in extraterrestrial life and all those big philosophical questions that space kicks off in us, about, are we alone? What's out there? What's next? And this golden record gave us a chance then to make a film that wasn't just a science story, which I would love anyway, but was giving us a window or an opportunity to look at all the other stuff around space exploration, about humankind. So I see it as ostensibly it's a film about the Voyager spacecraft, but actually it's a film about what it means to be human, what it means to dream, what it means to consider your existence, and all those things I thought about when I lay on the farm in Tipperary as a 7-year-old, looking up and wondering what was out there. And the film basically gave us a chance to do all of that. And I wanted to sole direct it this time. John supported that, so he produced it along with Claire Strong, who also produced it with John. So yeah, huge run-up, or at least I don't know, run-up, all of it was long. We were 4 years script to screen. So it was, they're a huge undertaking. It's a massive project, and you're taking on, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, you're taking on these incredibly well-known stories or incredibly important stories and trying to do right by them, and add to the canon. You know, films had been made about Voyager. You know, it was launched in 1977. Every few years there'd be different documentaries. They'd pass a different planet. There'd be a new film about, for Horizon would make them, and we passed Neptune, we passed Uranus. But I wanted to add to it, and I wanted to make something unique if I could. I wanted to make something that expressed my feelings about space, you know, that talked about space and science the way I felt about it, you know, which was full of love and ache and curiosity, and really celebrate science and celebrate the scientific process. So yeah, we took a long time, but we got there. Was that the question? Sorry, did I forget the question halfway?
No, not at all. I mean, it's an extraordinary film and deserves all the very considerable number of accolades it's received. But you know, you did all of what you've said, but it seems to me you also revealed to us some extraordinary characters and some really important 20th century characters. I mean, there's a long list there, but we could just start with Carl Sagan, and you know, I suppose maybe most famous astronomer, well, you know, one of in recent years, you know, author of Billions and Billions, and of course Contact as well. But and this way that you reveal these people to us, it was dramatic, and this is something then that you went on to explore in your next film, about Philip Lynott. And for those of you who don't know, Philip Lynott was an Irish musician, a songwriter, bass player, frontman with the fabulous band Thin Lizzy, starting in, I guess, the late 1960s and on through his early death in the 90s, I think, was it?
80s, yeah.
End of the 80s, I think, wasn't it? Yes. And Emer, you made a film about him and about the time, and about the effect of fame on this particular person, and it's a very touching film called Songs for While I'm Away. How did it come about? How did you, were you a Lizzie fan, or?
Yeah, you'd have to be a Lizzie fan. I mean, if all of my films, possibly with the exception of Here Was Cuba, they've come out of great love affairs. You know, and if I had to give any advice to students, it would always be, if you're certainly with documentary, you know, make sure there's subjects you love, you know, make sure there's subjects that you're happy to explore for. It's going to take a huge chunk of your life, you know. The Farthest took 4 years, the Songs for While I'm Away took nearly 2.5, you know, so I was a Thin Lizzy fan as a teenager, and I was approached by, after The Farthest was completing its cinema run and all its theatrical run, I was approached by Alan Marr, one of the film's producers, to see would I be interested. They had just gotten the go ahead from Philip's family, who had finally, after, you know, such a huge amount of time, had finally started to think that they were happy to explore his life on film, finally having, you know, he had a traumatic early death with young children. And so, like everything, took an awful long time for the moment to be right. And he heard I was a Thin Lizzy fan, and I nearly bit his arm off, because I'm a massive Thin Lizzy fan, and it was a real dream come true for me, to be able to look into Philip's life and to make a film. Yet again, I made the film I wanted to see, you know. I wasn't interested in rock documentary per se, you know, as a genre. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm not interested in deconstructing all the tracks on an album. And, you know, I want to look into the human. I want to look into the artist. I wanted to look at the man behind the image. For some of your contributors here, they may not know his image. He was an incredible, tall, black man, only black man in Ireland, possibly in the 50s and 60s, with his massive afro and long legs that went on forever, and a really, really charismatic and sexy performer. And and hid this incredible shyness and artistry and creativity behind this this really loud and overwhelming personality. So we got a chance to make that film. I wanted to try to tell the story of his life through his songs, and allow his words, his songwriting, his musicality, all his instincts, you know, even the fact that he loved Elvis and Jimi Hendrix, and, you know, to allow all these things be part of the story of what makes a man, what makes anyone's life, you know, give proper shade to all the pieces of his life, you know, that he wasn't one note. He's like all of us, you know, he contains multitudes. So yeah.
You had there was one particularly difficult subject that you needed to deal with, and I remember a particular moment in the interview with the guitarist Snowy White, where you bring up the issue of drugs, which, you know, it's a rock and roll story and it was of a certain era. How did you navigate? Because I'm assuming there was sensitivity around that subject for the film. Is that right?
Yeah, no, there was sensitivity, and including sensitivity from me. I was not interested in a salacious or a tabloid, you know, investigation of, you know, My Drugs Hell by Philip Lynette. You know, I only saw a man. I had a real strong feeling of, you know, an Irish expression we'd use about there, but for the grace of God go I. You know, I had a very strong feeling that if I was 19 and on stage and, you know, supporting Queen and in America with a #1 hit, you know, that I'd have been taking everything that was offered to me as well, you know. And I think in the 70s, we didn't really properly understand addiction the way we do now. We probably didn't understand some of the, you know, some of the drugs that they were all experimenting with. They're incredibly dangerous, you know. And I think he, you know, that was an interview with Scott Gorham, and he too was a bad addict at that moment, but he cleaned himself up, and at that same moment he kind of got clean, turned his life around, and Philip didn't quite do it, but maybe might have been able to if you'd given him another 6 months, or, you know. And I just don't think it was my role or anyone's role to be finger wagging and you know, looking at it in any sort of salacious way. I just thought it was tragic, and I thought it was tragic for a young father to lose his life like that, for a young man. He was only 36, you know, so young to be dying such a, you know, an unnecessary death. So yes, there were sensitivities around how to treat it, and in fact I've been criticized subsequently for not being hard enough on it, you know, for treating it a little I was going to say compassionately, and that's not what I'm being, that's why I feel I'm treating it with tenderness and compassion and sorrow. I've been criticized for not being hard enough on it, you know, that it, you know, it was class A drugs, but you know, it's a bridge it's a hill I'll fight on, because I'm very happy with the approach. I'm happy that we treated him with the dignity and respect I would show any addict or any person with addiction whose life got away from them, and you know, the sadness of that.
Yeah, no, that's makes perfect sense. So, you know, moving on from songs for While I'm Away, you in the last, I guess, year or two, and you've been working on Joyride, a feature film comedy. With an extraordinary cast, Olivia Colman and our own Ruth McCabe, Alwyn Fuere, and it comes out in July.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah? So what was the transition to working with in fiction like for you, moving across? A small step, a big step, or
well, you know, you talked about my editing career. Most of my editing had been in drama, so I felt confident enough. I felt confident that I had the skills, you know, the narrative skills anyway, you know, the storytelling skills, and over the course of all the documentaries, had forged incredible creative relationships with my DP, my designer, my editor, my composer, you know, felt that I had built an incredible team, although my cinematographer ultimately couldn't do Joyride, and I had a new cinematographer, James Mather, shot it, and that was an incredible, you know, scary and wonderful new skill to learn, you know, to have new people with you in the trenches, you know. So I felt confident, and in fact, I have an awful lot of friends who are actors. You know, I feel like I understand actors very well. And it was a little untested, but actually, I feel I got on great. I brought some of the skills. I feel I got on great with the actors. I feel that skill transferred over. I feel that what I had learned in documentary, which, as you said about the Farthest, about the characters, I really worked hard on the Farthest and on Songs While I'm Away to forge incredible relationships with the contributors, and you know, to ask them to trust me and to trust them, and to build a friendship based on mutual trust and like and openness. And I felt on the set of Joyride that I was asking Olivia and Charlie and all the other characters to almost do the same as I was asking contributors in my documentary to do, which was to show me themselves, you know, to be authentic, to be real, to let their guard down, you know, to let the audience in, you know, and to trust that process is safe and that the environment is safe for that. So I kind of approached it very similar to how I approached all the documentaries, you know, did an awful lot of prep work, did an awful lot of talking to all my core and key collaborators, an awful lot of learning. And then, of course, there were new things. There was casting. There was all this other stuff that I hadn't done before, but I jumped in. And yeah, it's being released in the UK and Ireland on the 1st of July. I'm not sure about the rest of the world yet. But it's interesting because we shot it in July last year. So it's an incredibly head spinning speed.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually, I mean, nowadays pretty quick turnaround, isn't
Yeah,
it?
amazing. Yeah, amazing.
It's fantastic. But you did mention when we were starting off that you were, you know, as a kid, you loved theater as well. And so, you know, did that also feed your interest in actors and acting in their whole sort of toolbox?
I love actors. I went out with an actor for 11 years. My best friend was an actor. I flat shared with many actors. I love actors. I love their bravery. I love their responsiveness, you know, their madness, you know, that they absorb. You know, my ex-boyfriend used to talk about almost being porous, you know, that new characters would kind of work their way into him and he would transform, you know, and I can see that, and I can see it's an incredibly creative place and terrifying. You know, my friend who's unfortunately now passed, she got stage fright, you know, and I read all about that and talked all about that for many years, that feeling of how exposed they are and how vulnerable they are, you know. So I love theater. Yeah, I go to theater all the time, and I love actors. I really, really, really respect and admire what an actor can do, what an actor's prepared to do. And in Joyride, I had a 14-year-old first timer, Charlie Reid, who plays the part of Mully, opposite, you know, acting in every scene, knocking it out of the park, acting opposite Oscar-winning Olivia Colman, you know. So in the bravery of that, you know, the confidence mixed with uncertainty, you know, he's not cocky, he's just going for it, you know, he's prepared to trust himself and stick his neck out. And I just love seeing it. It's a privilege beyond words to see it. And I felt that our job as the cinematographer, as the designer, costume, me, everyone, I felt our job was just to make a little space for them to play and to feel they could be these characters in this open and rewarding way. And yeah.
Well, you know, for directors starting out working with actors, you know, one of the things that sometimes I think we see is that there is almost a fear of actors among directors who haven't spent much time or maybe had any acting training themselves. And so you clearly did not have that at all. And so is this something that you'd encourage directors starting out to explore, to find their way to be really comfortable with actors and with their processes?
I honestly think huge, and I don't know if it's true of your film school or all film schools. I honestly feel when I meet young filmmakers, they're incredibly educated and open to visual style and what the camera is doing, and, you know, setting the tone, and very, very interested in the process, the physical process, perhaps not realizing that the actors are the core of the thing. In my view, you could shoot them on sellotape, you know, up against a blank wall. If the actors are working, if the script is working and the actors are working, that's the entire heart of it. All the other stuff is gravy, and great gravy. You know, it's making, you've got an individual voice, you've got a whole style, you know, it's all, it's not one thing or the other, but understanding actors, getting to know actors, doing an acting course yourself, actually learning about how hard it is for an actor to expose themselves, you know, to take a risk, and finding out how to talk to actors, you know, that feeling of actors don't want you to give them a line reading. If you want to respond to a performance and take one or take two, how do you do that? You know, how do you turn an actor around, or small degrees or large degrees, you know, in rehearsals, in conversations, and on the floor, you know. And I remember a pretty famous actress said to me once, she was on a film and she did one or two perform takes, and the director said, no. And the director came over and said, that's not how I see it in my head. You're not doing it how I see it in my head. And she said, well, now that you've cast me, it's about what I see in my head. You know, it's about, you know, I am now this character. This is what she looks like. This is how she speaks and walks. We can adjust, but actually we're not now trying to reproduce your vision of me. We're trying to liberate and empower my vision of the character, you know. And that was great learning for me, because I thought, you do all that work before you go. You do it in casting, you know, you narrow down in casting. You're trying to cast somebody possibly closer to what you imagine, you know, and in rehearsals, you're talking about what you imagine. And then at a certain point, you have to empower them.
Yeah.
And love them and support them and really make it safe and playful.
Now, and of course, with casting, maybe keeping your mind open.
Yeah, of course, you could be wrong. Absolutely.
Somebody surprising walking into the room and it not being the way you saw it, but they're incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Bring something exciting. We've got a couple of questions. I'm just looking over at the chat here. So because I'm just mindful of time. Considering your experience, what would you say to young editors when they are experiencing technical challenges when editing professionally? So I guess that's about software and hardware and possibly even story issues. Is there anything general you can think of that you know, when things were going wrong for you on an edit for whatever reason, or became challenging on an edit, did you have any go-to strategies that you might?
I can't really give advice, I'm sorry, to your questioner about technical. I was fortunate enough always to have a technical team, you know, an assistant editing backup. You know, I'm not the most technical, and I didn't want to be. I wanted to be free to just play with the story. You know, I didn't want my interest to be on the technical side. So I apologize if I can't really answer that, although get as much technical backup as you can, because actually what you need to be free, as the editor, you need to be free to be just able to have a clear road ahead of you with story and plot and performance and temp score and all the stuff you need to be free and fresh and able to respond to, and not get snarled up in technical hiccups.
Yeah, great. I mean, one of the things that the question brings to mind for me, and love to know what you think of this. I just came across a quote over the weekend where somebody said, you can judge the quality of an organization by how quickly bad news travels upwards. And I was thinking, like, as a director, I kind of always say to people, please, if something's going wrong, tell me as soon as you possibly can, even if it hasn't actually gone wrong yet, but because maybe we can work around it or help or do whatever. So I might say to editors, you know, if you think there's a problem coming up, as soon as you think it's there, just talk about it. Don't keep it to yourself.
It's the same conversation about collaborators and having trust and open dialogue. You know, it really does take a village to make a film, and your editor is one of your, you know, chief colonels, sergeants, whatever, like, you know, is going to be really, really there in the trenches with you and figuring out all the things you're figuring out, all the things that the director is trying to figure out in prep. The editor is still trying to figure out 6 months later, you know, all the nuance, all the subtext, all the plot twists, all the reveals, all the shocks or, you know, emotional beats, you know. So keep talking and encourage, have an environment where everyone can talk openly without censure.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Another question here, Emer. What are your favorite themes to work on, or do you have a dream project?
Themes, I over my desk I have the words heart, humanity, honesty, humor. That's definitely they're my touchstones in terms of the sort of films I like, the sort of material I like working with. Heart, you know, heart above all, heart, and the greatest of these is heart. And my dream project would be to do a science fiction film. I've got one in development now, although it's pretty expensive, so it might take a few years. But I would love to do a science fiction film. My favorite film of the last few years was High Life, Claire Denis film, just because it was so weird, so mad, so weird. So yeah, dream project would be to do something some science fiction. I'm a massive science fiction reader. So
great, fantastic. Any more questions before we wrap it up? We've got time for a couple more, if you want to put them into the chat. And well, I'm not seeing anything coming through immediately, although maybe people are typing frantically. Yeah. So, and you're kind of in pre-prep on a new project that you're maybe hoping to shoot soon.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can say to us about that? Or
yeah, it's an adaptation of an Irish novel called Montpellier Parade, written by an Irish author, Carl Geary, who adapted his own screenplay, and it's gone out to cast now, and we've some big meetings about it next week in London. So I'm hoping it's very, very different from Joyride. Although you describe Joyride as a comedy, I don't see it as a comedy.
Ah, okay.
Big-hearted, heart-filled kind of piece. It's funny, but it's not primarily a comedy, I don't think. And Montpellier Parade is almost the opposite again. It's not a comedy at all. It's set in 1988 in Ireland. It's about this love story, a younger man and an older woman, and beautiful, sensual kind of art house piece. And if we get lucky with cast, we might shooting at the end of this year, but more likely early next year, hopefully.
Great. Well, I am not seeing questions coming through here, so, and I'm mindful of your time. You know, the things that I'm going to be thinking about, particularly in terms of listening to you talk with us, are about the importance of heart to when you're approaching those words that you have up over your workspace. What was it? Heart. There was humor. What were the
honesty and humanity?
Honesty and humanity. Well, you know, that's I'm going to write those down. I'm also going to be thinking about the emphasis that you put for directors on being able to go into the space and explore, the space being onto the set where we're working, where we're shooting, and explore and be playful and experiment, and the importance of that, which I think can't be overemphasized. Emer, thank you so much for spending your time with us. It was just a joy to hear you talk about your work and going forward. And
thank you, David. Thank you for making it so easy.
Yeah, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. If there's any other questions, well, we'll see if anything pops through after when we wrap it up. But Emer Reynolds, thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing Joyride in July and your work going forward. It's very exciting. And thanks to FilmEU also for getting us all here. So it's just turned, I guess it's 2 o'clock in Europe, 1 o'clock over here. Thank you, Emer.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Anna. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.